Winter was just beginning to settle over Timberlake, and the cold seeped gradually through the pine canopy, slipping beneath collars, into the cracks of clothing, and deeper still, into the fractures within the human heart. Sheriff Laura Maddox sat in her patrol car, fingers loosely wrapped around a thermal mug, eyes unfocused on anything in particular. She still drove this road every week, but it had been a long time since she'd truly seen it, just the same winding turns repeating like memories that refused to let go. In the passenger seat, where Rex once sat, there was now only emptiness. No one had dared sit there in the 4 years since. As if occupying that space would somehow violate something sacred. Something no one could put into words. Laura still remembered the night of the avalanche at Ridgeback Pass. She and Rex had been separated when the ice came crashing down like a white monster. She was rescued, bruised, numb in one shoulder, but alive. Rex vanished without a trace. No body, no paw prints, only a severed collar, bloodied, found near the cliff's edge. After that night, people tried to comfort her with hollow phrases. Maybe he went farther to spare himself pain. He knew when it was time. Working dogs often sense when it's the end. But Laura had never believed any of it. Not because she was sentimental, but because she knew Rex would never leave her behind. That year, she held no funeral, made no memorial. She simply fastened a small tag behind the police station sign. Seat reserved, until the howl returns. That empty seat, the forest's edge, the night shifts when she swore she heard faint barking from afar. They had all become part of Laura's quiet rhythm of survival. Tonight was no different. Rain was coming, a crescent moon veiled by clouds. Timberlake was so still. Every small sound echoed like a pin dropping on wooden floor. Laura turned off the headlights and stopped the car at the fork toward Elk Hollow, the area Rex had once claimed as his favorite ground. There was something in the wind that caught in her throat. A familiar scent, wild, faint, but not unfamiliar. She stepped out of the car. Her flashlight cast a trembling beam through the thin mist. Dry leaves crackled beneath her boots. And then, she stopped. Her heart seemed to stop too, in a moment that couldn't be measured in time. Those eyes. From within the underbrush, in a patch of shadow untouched by light, a pair of amber-brown eyes stared directly at her. Not the gaze of a wild wolf. Not fearful, but a look hauntingly familiar. No one else had eyes like that. No one had ever looked at her like that, except Rex. Laura didn't call out. She didn't dare. Her greatest fear wasn't that the creature might charge, but that it would turn away and vanish, like the mirages she'd seen in dreams. But then, the dog stepped out. Slowly. Its body was thin, dark fur matted with mud and leaves. One back leg limped, but its head remained high. Its eyes never left hers. And around its neck, still hung the old military tag, scratched but intact, with one sunken line of engraving. Rex. Timberlake K903. Laura knelt. She didn't cry. She simply extended her hand, palm up, just as she had done every time she called Rex back during training. The dog stopped, just within arm's reach. It lowered its head, touched its nose to her palm, then sat down, exhaling, as if, after years of running, it had finally been granted rest. And Laura, the woman who thought she had lost all faith, whispered, her voice breaking, "I kept your seat, old friend. I've been waiting." The wind whistled through the trees. And in that moment, Timberlake didn't feel cold anymore. When Laura opened the door to the Timberlake Sheriff's office the next morning, the first sunlight in weeks streamed through the old window frame. Dust floated in the golden beam like fragments of memory awakened. Rex walked beside her, his steps limping but deliberate, as if he remembered every floor tile, every spot where the wooden boards gave a soft creak beneath his weight. The entire office fell silent. Deputy Ben Rohr, the youngest at the station, stood frozen, a half-eaten piece of toast still in his hand. His eyes widened like he'd just seen a ghost. "Sheriff, is that?" Laura didn't answer. She only bent down, removed the scarf wrapped around Rex's neck, and gently gestured. Rex looked around, then walked toward the seat by the window, his old spot, and lay down. Exhaling slowly, Ben set his toast down and took a step back. "What the hell is going on?" "Rex, he was dead. Wasn't he?" Laura stood upright, her voice even and slow, like a report that had been waiting 4 years to be spoken. "No, Rex was never dead. He just disappeared for a while. And now, he's back. All day. The town of Timberlake lived in a strange state between disbelief and wonder. Rumors traveled faster than the radio waves. Sheriff Laura's dog came back. He survived in the woods for 4 years? Does he still remember people? Can he still work? But Rex didn't care about any of those questions. He sat by the window, staring toward the forest. Each time a patrol siren sounded, he lifted his head. Each time Laura stood up, he followed right at her heels, just like before. By afternoon, Luke, the 9-year-old boy who lived with his grandmother Esther at the end of the street, rode his bike up to the station, carrying a warm cornbread loaf in his arms. He didn't say a word. He just sat on the steps, placed the bread on a piece of paper, and gently pushed it toward Rex, who was resting on the porch. Rex opened his eyes, stared at the boy for a long moment. No growling, no barking. He simply walked over, sniffed the bread, and licked the boy's hand. A quiet thank you. Inside, Laura watched through the window, and for the first time in years, allowed herself a smile. That boy was the first to see Rex in the woods. She said softly. He'd sneak out every week to leave food near the trail. Ben shook his head and sighed. Maybe, sometimes, the patient kindness of a kid is stronger than any miracle. That night, Laura took out the old name tag once issued to Rex on his first day of duty. A scratched metal plate, but the lettering still clear. Rex, Timberlake K903. She placed it on the desk, right beside her own police badge. Tomorrow, you'll get a health check. But today, just know, the seat you kept is finally filled again. Rex didn't look at her. He simply tucked his head beneath the leg of the desk, as if, at long last, he was home. And Laura, a woman who never believed she could be happy again, suddenly realized something. It wasn't Rex who needed her. It was she. After all the loss, who needed to believe that what is lost can still come back? On Saturday morning, the town of Timberlake seemed to awaken from a long slumber. The sound of hammers building fences, the honk of the bread delivery truck, and church bells echoed through the pine trees. But for young Luke, the most beautiful sound that morning was the deep, gravelly bark of Rex from the sheriff's porch. He pedaled over quietly, this time carrying not only cornbread but also a small leather-bound notebook. On the first page, scribbled in crooked handwriting, Luke and the four-legged friend's secret corner. Laura sat on the porch steps, cradling a coffee mug. Rex dozed beside her feet. But when Luke arrived, he lifted his head and gently wagged his tail. "You're up early," Laura said, her voice noticeably softer. "I drew a picture for Rex yesterday," Luke replied, "but I'm not sure he'll like it, because I colored his nose too big." Laura laughed. Rex stood slowly, padded over to Luke, sniffed the notebook, then exhaled, warm and slow, like a quiet nod. The boy looked up at Laura. "I don't think Rex got lost. I think he was guarding the forest, protecting the other animals." "And why do you think that?" Luke took a deep breath and pointed toward his grandmother, Esther, sitting under a tree across the street, her aging eyes watching them with a gaze that understood more than her words would ever say. Grandma said, "There are some souls that don't really go anywhere. They just step back into the shadows, waiting for the right moment to appear. And Rex is one of them?" Luke nodded firmly. She also said, "Animals that find their way back often carry a message." Laura didn't respond, but deep inside, Esther's words stirred something Laura had long avoided facing. Rex hadn't returned just to be loved. He had come back because something was coming. Something familiar. Something dark. That afternoon, Ben brought in a stack of files, mostly concerning illegal animal traps set near the town's outskirts over the past 2 months. Missing deer. A mother bear caught in a steel trap. Her front leg lost. No reports, only traces of blood. Bits of fur left on the snow. Laura frowned. The area, it's Elk Hollow Trail. The same place Rex showed up. Ben nodded, lowering his voice. "He came back for a reason, didn't he?" Rex, as if understanding they were talking about him, looked up at Laura. No bark, no whine, just a steady gaze, the look of someone who had survived the dark and was ready to return to it if he must. That evening, Luke sat in Esther's lap, his hand gently stroking the fur around Rex's neck, now silvered with time and snow. He asked, "Grandma, if you once lost someone, and they came back, But they weren't the same anymore. Are you allowed to feel sad? Esther pulled him close. Of course you can be sad. But you know what, sweetheart? What you're seeing is the scar. What you're not seeing is the courage it took to survive. Then, is Rex sad too? She didn't answer right away. And then, after a moment of silence, she whispered softly, Rex carries the sorrow of the whole forest on his back. But he didn't fall. And that's what makes him a guide. The boy nodded, and carefully wrote that sentence into his notebook, just beneath his drawing of Rex standing in the shadows of the woods. A guide doesn't need to speak. He just needs to walk ahead, so the light knows where to follow. Early winter winds lashed against the glass windows of the Timberlake sheriff's office. The night sky was thick with gray clouds, like a damp blanket draped over the entire town. Inside the station, Laura sat reading case files under a desk lamp, while Rex lay guarding the door. Though it was past 9 p.m., he hadn't slept. His eyes stayed wide open, ears perked, like a machine waiting to be triggered. Ben had just finished making coffee and set the mug down beside Laura when a strange sound echoed through the quiet. A faint knocking, small, steady, as if someone were gently tapping the back metal door of the evidence storage. You hear that? Ben asked, squinting. Laura placed her hand on her gun. She and Ben moved at the same time, cautious step by cautious step, down the narrow hallway. Rex didn't move, but his eyes followed them. A low growl rumbling from his chest, not out of fear, but warning. The evidence room door was ajar. No light, no signs of forced entry. But something inside felt off. Ben flicked on his flashlight. A tin box had been pulled from a shelf. Its lid was flipped open, and lying on the floor was a map of Elk Hollow Forest. The Western Trail circled in red, sloppily, as if drawn in haste. No one's allowed to touch this file but me and you, Laura said, narrowing her eyes. Then someone has a spare key. Or, Ben didn't finish the sentence. Because at that exact moment, the overhead light blew out. Pitch black. No power. No sound. Only the weight of breathing, and a faint screech, the groan of a hinge. Somewhere behind them, in that instant, from the dispatch room, a soft click rang out. Not loud, not urgent, but unmistakable. Laura recognized the sound. The silent alarm. It only activated if Rex used his nose to press the old sensor switch. A worn-out backup feature that only she and Rex had ever trained to use in case of radio blackout. Rex was signaling. Laura turned back just in time to see Rex bark sharply and sprint toward the side gate. She ran after him, Ben close behind. They reached the rear wooden gate just as it swung shut. The latch hadn't been fastened. Outside, a shadow darted across the road and into the forest. Ben pulled out his flashlight and chased after it. But Rex was already ahead, swift and silent as a living shadow. It took only 30 seconds. By the time they reached the edge of the woods, Rex was already returning, an old leather glove clenched in his mouth. Inside it, a small, hastily folded piece of paper. Laura unfolded it. Scrawled across it was a single word. Moongate. Moongate. The name of a collapsed cave section deep inside Elk Hollow. It had once been the site where she and Rex pursued poachers. Just before the avalanche, 4 years ago. That night, Laura didn't sleep. She sat by the old map. Rex beside her. Her finger traced the ridgeline. The marked red point. An old feeling stirred. The instinct of someone who had once almost died there. You didn't come back just to see me again, did you? She whispered. Rex lifted his head. No reaction. But his gaze held steady. Locked onto the red mark on the map. As if to say, we have to go back. This time, we finish it. Laura folded the map. She exhaled slowly. Looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. And for the first time in years, she no longer feared the forest's darkness. Because she knew, her partner had returned. And this time, they would not let the shadows take anyone else. The next morning in Timberlake was unusually quiet. As if nothing had happened the night before. But inside the sheriff's office, the air was thick with something both Laura and Ben knew all too well. A threat lurking beneath the town's peaceful shell. Laura spread the Elk Hollow map across the desk. The red mark, Moongate, no longer looked like just a geographic point. It felt like an unhealed scar. She dug through old case files. 4 years ago, A poaching ring had been exposed using the Moongate area to hide animal corpses and smuggle ivory, hides, and bones. But after the avalanche, when Rex went missing, the case was sealed. No one returned. Strangely, the note left behind by the intruder didn't contain a threat. No name, no demands, just one word: Moongate. A summons to return. Someone wants to lead us there, Ben said, leaning on the desk. But lead us, or lure us? Laura didn't answer. She was watching Rex. He didn't bark, but his entire body was tense. His eyes shifted from the map to the door, as if instinct was pulling him back to that place, even if it meant crossing the very ground where he had nearly died. That afternoon, Laura packed light, flashlight, radio, a small knife, and a Glock. Ben objected to her going alone, but she stood firm. If there's a trap, I won't risk both of us. Rex walked beside her. No leash, no commands, just one person and one shadow, weaving through the wet underbrush and fog-slicked paths. Moongate lay deep within the forest. Jagged stones arched into a natural gateway, as if opening into the earth's belly. The trees thinned here. No birds, no wind, only a silence that waited to break. Laura crouched down. Footprints. Adult, heavy, just a few hours old. And blood, very faint, smudged into the moss. Suddenly, Rex let out a low growl. A warning. What is it, old friend? She whispered, turning her head, and everything went black. When she came to, her head throbbed. Her hands were tied with vine rope. She was lying in a small rock chamber, no light, no exit. The stench of animal hide and gunpowder churned her stomach. A figure stepped forward, tall, unshaven, clothes caked in dirt. But it was his eyes that made her blood run cold. Eyes that had once watched her through a rifle scope, and had never forgotten. Well, I thought you were dead, he sneered. But I guess the name, Maddox, is tougher than I remembered. Laura squinted. It was Jonas Creek, the poacher ringleader from 4 years ago. Presumed dead after the avalanche. I should have killed you when I had the chance. Instead, I let those idiots handle the cleanup. Big mistake. He pulled a knife from his belt, its blade catching the flicker of his small flashlight. Laura said nothing. She was waiting, not for help, but for footsteps. A deep, low growl echoed from outside the cave. Jonas froze. Laura smiled. He doesn't make mistakes. Rex burst in like a silent arrow. No barking, just pure motion. A blur of fur and muscle as he slammed into Jonas, sending the man crashing back with a scream. The knife flew from his hand. Laura rolled over, bracing against the ground, snapped the rope with her knee, grabbed the Glock. Don't move, Jonas, she shouted, aiming straight at his chest. He froze, but his eyes were locked on Rex, who now stood between them, teeth bared. Blood trickled from a small cut on his ear. Jonas coughed, spat blood, and chuckled bitterly. He's a demon. He should have died. Laura stepped closer, crouching. He should have, she said softly. But maybe, some spirits were born to return, right when they're needed most. The sky over Timberlake that night held no moon. But back at the station, under warm yellow light, Laura pinned a new photo to the wall. Rex, standing on the cold stone of Moongate. His back straight, eyes locked on the camera. Beneath it, in Laura's handwriting, read, "Some heroes never leave. They just wait in silence." Rex lay motionless on the exam table at the Timberlake Veterinary Clinic. The wound on his ear wasn't deep, but the stab to his abdomen, Jonas's parting strike before being taken down, was still bleeding slowly through thick gauze. His breathing grew heavier, his brown eyes half closed, as if fighting through a long, cold dream. Laura sat beside him, her hand wrapped gently around his front paw, while Dr. Sam Jennings worked in quiet concentration. "I'm not sure," Sam murmured. "He was out in the woods for too long. His endurance is extraordinary, but he's not made of steel. The wound is deep. Blood loss is serious. If he makes it through the night, there's hope." Laura nodded, but her tears fell silently onto her wrist. "He came back. He saved my life. Now it's my turn to keep him alive." She didn't leave the room all night. Meanwhile, the whole town seemed to hold its breath. Word spread from the church to the bakery, to the gas station. People no longer called Rex the lost dog, but Timberlake's hero. Luke brought an old knit hat of his. laid it beside Rex, and whispered, "This is the hat I wore the first time I saw you. If you remember me, you won't leave me behind, right?" Esther, Luke's grandmother, stood by the clinic window, watching the dark sky. She said nothing, but her aged fingers moved slowly across her prayer beads, muttering an ancient German blessing no one understood anymore. But just as Laura stepped out to get coffee, the police station alarm blared. A break-in at the evidence room. Ben, on shift in her place, called in urgently. Someone broke in from the back, right through the Moongate section. Cameras were cut. Forest maps and several biological samples are gone. Laura raced to the station, her heart pounding. The night at Moongate wasn't over. Jonas had only been the door. Someone, or some group, was still running something deeper, hidden in the dark. Back at the station, Laura reviewed the footage from the one surviving camera. A hooded figure. Not Jonas. His gait was steady, efficient, clean. Not a poacher. A professional. Even more disturbing, he wasn't in a hurry. Every move was deliberate, like someone who had been there before. "This isn't about animals anymore," Ben said. "This is a covert operation." And Jonas? He was just a pawn. Laura stared at the map. The stolen section was the geological overlay of the Moongate area. That only made sense if someone was digging for something, or hiding an entrance. The next morning, Rex opened his eyes. Weak, but alive. Laura walked in, knelt beside the bed, and whispered, "You've won the first battle. But the war's still ahead." Rex didn't growl, didn't bark. He simply looked at her, then mustered the strength to lift his head just a few centimeters. A small gesture, but enough for Laura to understand. He wasn't backing down, not while Timberlake remained unsafe, not while the darkness had yet to be called by its true name. That night, in the dim office of the Timberlake Sheriff's Station, Laura opened the old case file and began writing on a blank sheet. Moongate Operation, Phase 2, The Return. Below that, she added in red ink, "Team member, Rex, confirmed. Recovering, ready." And she pinned that final line on the tactical board, right beneath the Timberlake PD emblem. No one gets left behind. Not even the ones who walk on four legs. 3 days after the break-in, a man stepped quietly out of a sand-colored Jeep parked in front of the Timberlake Sheriff's Station. He wore a wide-brimmed hat, a faded military jacket, and carried an old leather map tube in one hand. Laura had never seen him before. But the moment she laid eyes on him, she sensed something different. Not a smuggler, not a curious reporter. His eyes were the kind worn down by truth. Truth so heavy it had become a burden of its own. "I'm Dr. Henry Whitlow, military archaeologist," he said, holding out a paper stamped by the Department of Defense. "I'm here because of Moongate." Laura narrowed her eyes. "The DoD? Don't tell me that place was once not a base," Henry interrupted, his voice low and firm. "A research facility. Underground. Level 4. Sealed in 1978. Ben's jaw dropped. "For what?" "Timberlake is a logging and farming town." Dr. Henry unrolled the map tube on the desk. It revealed an early schematic of the cavern system beneath Moongate. A long, winding tunnel leading to a large circular chamber, big enough to land a helicopter. In faded ink across the top were the words, "Zone 9 Subsonic, Animal Trial Project." Laura turned to look at Rex, still bandaged, lying by the desk. But at that very moment, his ear twitched. He growled, quietly, instinctively. Henry nodded solemnly. "I thought so. This dog has heard that sound before. And he still remembers." According to Henry, in the 1970s, a military research unit attempted to trigger combat responses in animals using subsonic frequencies. The trials failed, but several deer, wolves, and hybrid canines were injected with experimental compounds and released into the Elk Hollow woods to monitor long-term effects. "We assumed it ended when a minor earthquake collapsed the site. But the map stolen from your evidence room? It may contain the key to reopening paths once buried." Laura shivered. "You're saying someone's trying to reopen the facility? Or worse, activate it?" Henry's voice was grave. "I'm saying they may already have." That night, Rex began acting strangely. He stood in the middle of the room, head snapping back and forth toward the forest. He growled, not loud, but constant. At times, he lunged at nothing, as if hearing something no human ear could catch. "Luke," sketching quietly nearby, whispered, "Grandma, I think Rex is trying to warn us." Esther studied Rex for a long moment, then rose slowly. "He's not warning," she said softly. "He's calling." Laura crouched next to Rex. "What do you hear?" Rex walked to the window. His eyes locked on the forest. Not unusual, but this time, he wasn't just watching, he was trembling. Ben finished assembling the frequency scanner and looked over at Laura. "There's low band interference, very faint, but continuous. Someone is transmitting, or releasing some kind of unstable audio pulse. And Rex is being affected." Henry checked his handheld device. A series of broken beeps emitted, then stopped abruptly. "Oh God," he stepped back. "That frequency, it matches the signal from Moongate in 1977. Someone's turning on a device that's been buried for over 40 years. Laura stood up, and her eyes were no longer just those of a small-town sheriff, but of a former field commander who had lost teammates, lost her partner, and no longer feared the truth. "We go in tomorrow. Before they activate something that should never exist." Rex let out a low growl. A sound of agreement, as if he'd waited his whole life for her to say it. And in the Timberlake night, a night with no moon, no wind, an old tape recorder picked up a garbled transmission from the heart of Elk Hollow. "Ready, bring it to the surface." The next morning's dawn brought no sunlight, just a leaden gray sky hanging low over Timberlake, a silent omen of an incoming storm. But Laura, Ben, Dr. Henry, and Rex didn't wait for it to pass. They suited up, heavy coats, high-lumen flashlights, comms gear, filtration masks, and the reconstructed cave map Henry had restored. Rex led the way, still bandaged, but silent and swift. Each step was feather-light, his nose to the ground, ears alert, as if the forest's very spirit walked alongside him. Moongate appeared after over an hour of trekking through mist and brush. At the base of the arching stone gate was an entrance crudely fenced off with rusted mesh, but now cleanly sliced open. Someone had been here, Laura whispered. "Lights off. Switch to infrared." Ben checked his GPS. Total signal loss. Rex growled, "Low, steady." They entered. Inside the cavern, the air dropped to a metallic chill. Natural rock walls gave way to concrete. Clear signs of a once classified military installation buried in time. The deeper they went, the wider the corridor became. The ceiling rose. Steel grates creaked underfoot. On an opened blast door, faded words glowed under UV light. Zone 9 Behavioral Control Lab. Henry froze. It's still intact. Suddenly, Rex turned his head. His ears twitched. A faint sound, like pulsing waves, echoed from somewhere deep beneath the earth. Laura nodded. "We keep moving." They stepped into a large circular chamber. Mirrored walls surrounded the space. Large cages stood like skeletons of something once monstrous. Some cages were shattered. Some held nothing but bone wrapped in snapped wires. But at the center, one cage remained lit, and inside, something was breathing. Rex stopped. His fur bristled. Laura raised her light, and they saw it. A creature, wolf-like in form, but jet black, blind-eyed, twitching as if lost in a perpetual nightmare. On its ear, an old device blinked a slow, red pulse. "Oh my God," Ben whispered. "It's still alive?" Henry squinted at the tag. "This is test subject OMEGA7. The final prototype. It wasn't supposed to exist." The creature suddenly raised its head, snarling, not out of fear, but recognition. It had sensed Rex. Two beings stared at each other. One saved and loved by humans. The other created and abandoned. Rex didn't bark. He simply stepped forward. Laura reached out to stop him, but Rex moved gently past her, pacing toward the cage, steady and calm. Omega-7 shrieked, slamming its head against the bars. Its eyes raged, but as Rex stood still, unmoving, the shrieking stopped. Silence swallowed the room. Henry murmured, "It remembers Rex. They may have trained together, before the program was shut down." Laura's eyes landed on a scar beneath the creature's fur. A curved mark. The same place Rex carried his. They were test brothers. One survived. One was left behind. Suddenly, the lights flickered hard. A voice echoed from the wall speaker. Low and mechanical. "Step away from the chamber. This area is sealed. Intruders will be neutralized." Laura drew her weapon. It's no longer a secret. Who's running this place? No answer. Just the sound of electricity snapping. And then, total darkness. A loud clang. The cage door of Omega-7 had unlocked. A guttural roar shook the floor. The black blur burst forward. Not at them, but toward a side corridor. It was escaping. Rex bolted after it. No command given. No hesitation. Laura shouted, "Rex, no." Too late. He vanished into the tunnel. A gray and white arrow slicing through the earth. The team chased after him. Beams of light bouncing off rusted beams and collapsed walls. Water dripped from cracks above. Their boots thudded like war drums in the hollow belly of a forgotten ship. Ahead, Rex barked. For the first time since his return to Timberlake. But it wasn't an ordinary bark. It was a signal. A call. A code. Rex had found something. Or someone. Laura tightened her grip on her gun. Her eyes were steel. We're past the point of return now. Laura led the way. Her Glock trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the steep descent of the corridor. With each step, she listened for Rex's paw falls. Fading, then suddenly, gone. Ben followed closely behind, flashlight sweeping across the thick dust coating the concrete walls. They had moved beyond the main lab. Here, the air was too still. As if something unseen was holding its breath, waiting. He's following Omega-7, Laura whispered. But he's not chasing. Rex is leading. Leading? Henry panted. Leading it where? Laura narrowed her eyes. To where it was born. Around the final bend, a heavy steel door emerged, sealed with an old fingerprint scanner. Above it, barely visible, sublevel E, central control chamber. Ben exhaled. I thought this place was buried in 78. Laura examined the keypad. Fresh smudges on the dust. Someone's been here, not long ago. Henry activated a portable scanner. Within seconds, the lock clicked open, no alarm. Someone wants us inside, he said softly, or isn't afraid of being found. The control room was vast, like the hollow of a forgotten stadium. Bulletproof glass lined the walls. Old CRT monitors flickered dimly, some still displaying ghostly streams of data. In the center sat a swivel chair. Back turned. On the floor, an active subsonic transmitter. Humming low. The frequency was nearly inaudible. But Rex, now beside the machine, snarled deeply. His ears flattened, eyes bloodshot. The figure in the chair slowly turned. A familiar face. Jonas Creek. Laura stepped back. No, you're supposed to be dead. The man smiled faintly. Jonas was just a name. I am the last survivor of Project Omega. Ben's fists clenched. You're the one behind this? Not behind, the man corrected, voice disturbingly calm. I released it. The project was terminated because the government couldn't control what we made. But those creatures, Omega-7, and Rex, they were never failures. They're the future. Laura stepped forward, gun leveled at his forehead. He's not a weapon, not a file in a lab. He's my partner. The man chuckled, cold, bitter. And your partner is dying in a world that doesn't need his kind anymore. You think it's coincidence he reacted first? Without Rex, the signal would have never restarted. He reactivated Omega. Henry whispered, pale. He's the key. Then, from the far corridor, Omega-7 burst in. Its eyes glowed red, mouth curled in a snarl torn between memory and agony. Rex stepped forward, placing himself between Laura and the beast. The man shouted, amplify the signal. Phase 4. Now. The console trembled. The hum turned piercing. Omega shrieked and lunged toward them. But Rex didn't move. Laura screamed, Rex, get back. But Rex took one step closer. And howled. A long, low, mournful cry. It wasn't a warning. It was a call. Omega froze. Its legs trembled. Its eyes blinked. Wildness giving way to something else. And then, impossibly, it lowered its head, stepped toward Rex, and lay down. Rex moved closer, touched noses, not as a challenge, but as a brother reaching a sibling left behind. No rage, only sorrow. Laura raised her weapon and fired. Straight into the transmitter. It exploded in a burst of sparks. The signal gone. The man howled, too late. Rex charged, pouncing, not to kill, but to hold him down. Ben cuffed him. Henry knelt beside Omega and removed the blinking chip from its skull. It was over. As they emerged from Moongate, the Timberlake sky cracked open, light beginning to filter through. A breeze stirred the trees. Rex and Omega walked beside Laura. One from the present, one from the past, both free now, from what mankind had once chained them to. News of Omega-7 and the underground lab spread through Timberlake like wildfire. Local radio, social media, even a few reporters from the city had already set up tents at the edge of town. But amid the noise, the state issued one official statement. The creature discovered at Elk Hollow is considered a matter of national defense and must be removed for threat assessment. In plain terms, they wanted to seize Omega-7 and terminate it. Omega was now held in a makeshift quarantine enclosure at the town's edge. Rex never left its side. Anytime someone approached, Rex stepped forward, silently placing himself between them and Omega. Laura gave no command. She understood. Rex wasn't just protecting that creature. He was protecting a part of himself. A memory that had no words. Ben entered the medical station, holding a folder of lab results from Henry. No signs of infection, no abnormal neurological activity after the chip was disabled. But he hesitated. It's not enough. Not enough to stop them from killing it? Laura's voice was dry. Ben nodded grimly. Unless we can prove humanitarian grounds, or that it's capable of safe integration, they'll treat it like a threat. And time's running out. That night, Luke, the boy who always watched Rex, quietly approached the wire fence. In his small arms was a backpack. Inside, an old comic book he used to read to Rex, and a tiny dinosaur pillow. He knelt beside the fence, whispering, "I know, they're scared of you. Just like they used to be scared of Rex. But Rex never bit me. He just laid beside me when I was sad." Omega-7 didn't move closer. But its eyes, no longer clouded, stared. As if, listening. Luke continued, "I could read to you. Just a little. Nobody has to know." So he opened the comic book. His voice was soft. Not perfect. But it was real. Not a command. Just a story. 10 minutes passed. Omega lay down. Its head rested on the ground. Eyes half shut. Outside the fence, Rex lay down too. Facing the same direction. Two creatures. Two sides of the wire. Same posture. Same peace. By morning, when the state task force arrived, tranquilizers loaded, steel chains dangling from their belts, they were stopped not by police, but by the people of Timberlake. Esther, the high school teacher, the bakery owner, they formed a line in front of the enclosure. "We won't let history repeat itself," Esther said calmly. "We let Rex disappear once, no one said a word. This time, we speak." Laura stepped out holding a folder. Inside, documented observations that Omega-7 had shown positive response to children. Zero aggression for 72 hours. And allowed unrestrained contact with Rex. No intervention required. "If you want to remove him," Laura said evenly, "you'll have to override the state-level Animal Protection Act, which I signed this morning, with full backing from the town council." The task force backed off. They had no legal grounds. Not if the creature was no longer classified as a direct threat. That night, in the quiet enclosure, Rex and Omega slept, pressed against opposite sides of the wire. Noses nearly touching. From a distance, Laura watched. Luke stood beside her. "Do you think he'll stay with us?" Luke asked. Laura didn't answer right away. Then she knelt down, placing a hand gently on his head. "I don't know what Omega will become," she said softly. "But I know, you've taught him something most adults never could." Luke blinked. "What's that?" She smiled. "Trust." Timberlake had begun to quiet down. The media left. The fences were reinforced with wood and adorned with flowers, brought by townsfolk. Omega-7 was no longer called a creature. Now, he had a name, simple. Human. Shadow. The one Luke had given him. Rex never left his side. As if he understood that the world might forgive more easily if something familiar stayed close. Rex wasn't a guard. He was a witness of trust. But not everyone was ready to forgive. In an old cabin at the edge of town, Douglas Granger, a longtime hunter, sat alone before the fireplace. Antlers and wolf pelts lined the walls. In his lap, a newspaper showed Omega's image. "That thing tore through my livestock in 1980. He muttered, eyes gleaming with resentment. "It ain't dog. It ain't wolf. It's what happens when man plays God." 3 nights later, as Timberlake slept, a figure crept over the enclosure's fence. In his hand, a slab of raw meat, soaked in highly concentrated herbicide. Shadow didn't touch it, but Rex, nearby, caught the scent. The moment the stranger flung the meat through the mesh, Rex lunged, grabbed it, and bolted away from the pen. The commotion triggered a deep, guttural howl from Shadow, long and mournful. It woke the entire town. Laura arrived first. Rex lay on the ground, foaming at the mouth. Shadow howled beside him, no longer a threat, but a brother in grief. The meat, torn and soaked in poison, lay nearby. Ben and Henry apprehended Douglas shortly after. Bootprints, glove fibers, and trail cam footage left no doubt. He didn't deny it. A man-made thing like that has no right to live among us, he said. It was built for war. Laura didn't respond. She walked into the medical center. Rex was being given an antidote, but the toxin was strong. His heartbeat, faint and fading. Luke sat beside him, wide-eyed and silent. I said I'd protect Shadow, the boy whispered. But Rex protected us both. The next morning, Rex still breathed, shallow, but steady. Henry shook his head in disbelief. I've never seen any species resist that level of toxicity. Maybe Rex's immune system evolved. After all these years alone. Laura rested her head beside the cot. He's still fighting. And Shadow, since that night, never left the door of the clinic. Everyone who passed was watched. Not with wild suspicion, but with the eyes of a creature who understood loss. The poisoning divided public opinion. But this time, Timberlake didn't stay silent. Esther, Luke, the teacher, the baker, dozens signed a petition demanding official sanctuary status for Rex and Shadow. As living survivors of a history once buried, Laura submitted the petition with one final note. When a creature chooses to sacrifice itself to protect what it once feared, it ceases to be a product of experimentation. It becomes a being, with a soul. A week later, Rex opened his eyes. He looked at Laura, then at Shadow, who lay curled beside him, unmoving, ever present, no bark, just a look. But in that gaze was something deeper than language. I came back, and I'm still here. The state hearing room in the Capitol was a world away from Timberlake. Cold microphones glowed under the lights. Rows of delegates sat like statues. Cameras streamed every flicker of emotion. But amid the polished silence, Timberlake brought something different. Truth, unvarnished. Laura stood before the mic, her hand resting on the file with images of Rex and Shadow. But before she could speak, a door opened quietly at the back of the hall. Luke stepped inside, his small hand wrapped around a leash. And Rex walked forward on his own. No command, no guidance, just those steady, calm eyes, moving straight toward the podium, as if he knew exactly where he belonged. No one stopped him. The room held its breath. Laura looked at Rex, then quietly stepped aside. If the council allows, I'd like to give the first word to a citizen of Timberlake. One who's lived through all of it, and who doesn't need language to prove anything. Rex placed his front paws on the wooden podium, stood tall, did not tremble. One delegate, an old veteran, tightened his jaw. Any trained dog can stand at attention, he murmured. But those eyes, only brothers in arms carry that look. Laura began to speak. She recounted everything, from Rex's return, to the rescue at Moongate, to the night he threw himself in front of poison to save Shadow. She didn't beg, she testified. We didn't come here seeking pity, she said. We came to ask, if a creature chooses to protect, to endure pain instead of inflicting it, is it still a threat? Or is it a reflection of the good we humans once broke, and now, are finally forgiven for? The camera zoomed in. Rex didn't bark, didn't lower his head. He simply looked at those seated above, the ones holding power over life and death. And then, something no one expected. Shadow, who had been standing silently beside Luke, stepped into the room. No handler, no leash, no sound. He walked up beside Rex, sat down, and for the first time, in front of dozens of officials and millions watching live, two beings bred to be weapons sat side by side, like two children, who had found their way home. The decision didn't come that day. But when the chairman of the council finally stood, he said only this: I fought in Iraq, lost my best friend to an IED. The K9 in our unit stayed by his body for 2 full days, until rescue came. Today, I saw those eyes again. 3 weeks later, Rex and Shadow were granted special protected status. Not as property, but as living symbols of endurance and reconciliation. Under the care of Timberlake, a modest state grant funded the creation of the Rex Memorial Home. Part veterinary clinic, part educational center dedicated to courage, healing, and legacy. Esther proposed the inscription on the carved wooden archway. Here, a life was forgiven, and became light. At the opening ceremony, families took photos, children laughed. Shadow, once a ghost, now ran freely, chasing sunbeams and sticks like any ordinary dog. But Rex was not in the crowd. He lay beneath the big oak behind the field. The cool, quiet place where he could see everything. Children laughing, people smiling, and Shadow, finally learning to play. Luke sat beside him, flipping through his worn comic book. His voice, stronger now, didn't waver. This last chapter is about a dog who forgot he was once abandoned, because he learned that love always finds its way back. Rex didn't need to bark. He simply closed his eyes and slept in the peace he had bought with every scar from the past. Some stories don't need to end with fireworks or statues of stone. Just a quiet porch, a patch of soft grass, and a name no one forgets anymore. Rex, you weren't just a dog. You were a witness, a brother, a hope that chose to forgive. And Timberlake, a small town, became the place that proved even creatures bred for war can still choose love. If you ever pass through that place, stop for a moment. You might see a pair of eyes resting beneath the tree's shade. Not asking for anything, not waiting for praise, just hoping you'll know. Some beings may have been forgotten, but they never gave up on us.